I want to set a precedent on salvation in general, because a lot of times I hear different things from churches, especially those of more towards like a traditional evangelical church position, which is usually like a dispensational systematic. If you guys don't know what those words are, then I hope I don't lose you with my conversation right now, but they're theological terms, and so we have to look at them because these are the major underpins of what we do in the church practice and how pastors interpret God's word. Either they're going to come through the camp of dispensationalism, where they see God dealing with man through dispensations, and that's how they interpret the Bible, and thus you get teachings based upon that. Or the other, which is more traditional, you have what's called a Reformed or a New Covenant theology, where you have the Bible looked at as God dealing with man through covenants. And so those are your two positions. And so if you look at one or the other, how salvation occurs is going to look different. I use both of them actually to understand the scriptures better. But one thing when it comes to salvation, I tend to go more towards the Reformed view or the traditional view, because I think that better represents and helps interpret any verses that deal with salvific matters. And if you don't use that type of systematic, you get a little bit of like rockiness or confusion when you start to interpret verses outside of that viewpoint. For instance, I hear a lot of times, obviously, we talk about the relationship of Christ and it's going to produce. And what happens sometimes is you get more of this works mentality or this works-based theology rather than understanding the grace that you've been brought into. But the grace that we've been brought into is something we don't earn or merit. Most theological positions hold that, whether you're dispensational or reformed. But what happens is in the dispensationalist, that now you start to fall back to this idea of like almost like a legalism, where you have to set up all these things to prove that you're saved, either proving it to yourself. You take verses like, work out your own salvation. Or you take other verses like Jesus speaking, saying, if I did this, then you guys will do more. And you take all these different verses and you don't interpret them in the right lens. And then the next thing you know, you're going back to that work-based mentality. And you have to understand, like the reality of your salvation, A, it had nothing to do with you in the beginning. And B, how it is worked out is a work of God.